I just want to say a couple of things before I start. This is the third year for this committee, and I swore years ago I was getting off every committee. I hated committees, but I have to say this is the best thing that ever happened to me. I just love coming to these events. You get to hear the stories behind all these athletes that you've heard about all your life, and it's the stories that bring everybody together and make you realize how lucky you are to have grown up in New Waterford. Another thing I just wanted to say is that I don't know if most of you here know that Carl Marsh is my brother-in-law. He was married to my husband's sister, Marilyn. And when I was first married and I would go and visit Marley and Carl, that's all I'd hear. She'd be home looking after 3 little babies, and he'd be, Merle, where's my glove? Merle, where's my shin pads? And I thought I would kill this guy if I owned him. I would literally kill him. Anyway, you also know that in later years, Marilyn got very sick with Parkinson's disease, and I have to say that Carl showed his true character, and he looked after her for a good 15 years, doing things that most husbands would never dream of, and I have to eat my words for every time I said I would kill him. I admire him greatly. Okay, so for the purposes of this address, my name is Joanne Connors McDonald. Freddy Connors Sr. was one of the best all-around athletes to come out of the town of New Waterford. His prowess on the basketball court is legendary, having played on several Maritime Championship teams before captaining the legendary 1946-47 Strands to a Canadian championship. As a boy, he lived and breathed the game, despite having to enter the coal mines at an early age. Many times after day shift in the mines, he and other teenage miners would gather at Calvin Gym for a rowdy game of basketball. At 5'6", he was an amazing ball handler, and many teammates attributed his dribbling skills to the fact that there were many pillars in Calvin Hall Gym, and he became adept at dribbling around them. They said he could dribble his way in and out of a piece of Swiss cheese. Often, he and his teammates would throw their sneakers over their shoulders and walk across the old Lingam Bridge, as opposed to the new bridge, which was built before I was born, past the sandbar and into Dominion and Glace Bay. Now they're walking, and they're looking for any teams that wanted to take them on that day. Although basketball was his first love, Freddy also played the nets for whatever local hockey team needed him, and he dabbled in the sport of rugby as well. There is a picture of him at 16 years of age on the Caledonia rugby team that in 1934 won the Cape Breton Junior Rugby Championship. Freddy was also known to strap on the boxing gloves and was a fierce competitor in that sport. As a runner, he won many races, most notably in 1933, when as a 15-year-old, he won the New Waterford 1-mile race and the Dominion 1-mile race as well. As if these sports were not enough, Freddy also passionately played baseball for many New Waterford and district teams throughout the late 30s and early 40s. He played softball at this time as well, most notably for the New Waterford Ramblers and New Waterford Dodgers. A common practice for baseball teams of that era was to pick up extra players if any local teams were going to the provincial or maritime championships. And young Freddy Connors was often a welcome addition to many baseball teams at playoff time, as playoff time drew near. He was still active in softball well into his adult years, playing on the 1957 Cape Breton Dosco championship team. Freddy's sports career was interrupted during the war years, but he remained active in sports, even in the Navy, working as a phys ed instructor for the troops. Upon his return to New Waterford, he also began refereeing basketball at high school level and umpiring local baseball games as well. I would be remiss if I told you about Freddy's sports career and did not dwell on his years with New Waterford Strands basketball teams. He joined the Strands in 1939 at 20 years of age. He soon became known as the spark plug on the team, earning the respect of his fellow players with his work ethic so that they eventually elected him their captain. The following information can't be found in any articles or record books that I'm aware of. Some of it I learned as I sat watching the early Coal Bowl games in the 1980s, where I was smart or lucky enough to position myself where other great members of that famous Strands basketball team sat. I called it Senator's Corner. And they told me many stories of my Uncle Freddy and how different the game was played back in the day. Other bits of information came from Carl Marsh, who, as an 11-year-old, was fortunate enough to be present at that legendary basketball game in 1947 when the Strands won the Canadian Championship. Carl told me that, as a kid, if you waited around the door early enough and one of the players let you carry their kit bag upstairs, you got to watch the games for free. He said the jockeying for position at the door was something fierce. Kind of like jumping the fence for the Giants game back in '59. The New Waterford Strands played in the Cape Breton Senior Basketball League throughout the 1940s, which consisted of 4 teams. Their games were all played at either the Strand Gym or the Whitney Pier Community House, which was located where Tim Hortons in the pier is now. As a weary, dirty coal mining town, New Waterford quickly learned to love the sport of basketball as a diversion from the reality of everyday life, and all games were fiercely contested and well attended. New Waterford quickly began to earn a reputation as a hotbed for the sport. The old Strands players told me that all shots at the time were taken underhand, including foul shots. The overhead shot and the jump shot were still years away. After every basket, there was a jump ball, which slowed down the game considerably. The team therefore depended greatly on their center, Gussie McNeil, to get the ball to their shooting guards, Corny Lever and Freddy Connors, who provided a lot of scoring power. The Canadian Basketball Championships at that time were held one year in the East and the alternating year in the West. New Waterford, by virtue of winning the Maritime Championship in 1947, earned the right to host the Canadian Championships that year. The excitement in the town was palpable. It must be noted that the host team had to pay all of the expenses for the visiting team, and the townspeople gave donations eagerly just so that they could witness that level of basketball. The men on the team, including Freddy, all worked day shift in the mines that day. Each miner had to dig a certain quota of coal for their shift, and that day was no different. The company was not letting them off the hook. Many of the other miners, I'm told, dug their own quota quickly that day and then proceeded to help the Strands players to dig their quota as well. Regardless, they all still had to put in a full shift and then go home to change and walk back to the Strand Gym for the evening game. Carl Marsh told me he can vividly remember Freddy Connors dribbling down the floor that night. He always carried a signature white handkerchief stuck in the front of his shorts to wipe the sweat off his face continuously during the game. He was simply unstoppable that night, proving himself to be a true captain as he led all scorers on the way to victory. Can't you just feel the excitement in the Strand Gym that night? Freddy Connors more than made up for his height with the heart of a lion. It's been said, it's not the size of the man in the fight, but the size of the fight in the man. And Freddy Connors Sr. was the living embodiment of that statement. His beloved 1947 Strands basketball team was inducted into the Nova Scotia Sports Hall of Fame and were also the first team selected to be inducted into our inaugural New Waterford Sports Heritage Hall of Fame 2 years ago. As a young girl, myself and my sisters played a lot of basketball, first in Agnes, and we were continuously asked if Freddy Connors was our father, as if the gene were somehow able to be passed from one generation to the next. The fact is that this type of play may never be replicated again, as these boys had to perform a man's job at an early age and played the game with the ferocity of boys who were trying desperately to hang on to their youth. Today's youth will luckily never know that level of desire in sports. The fact that Freddy died just 2 months after his 50th birthday and still managed to amass this amazing sports career makes him more than deserving of the honor of being inducted into the Waterford Sports Heritage Hall of Fame tonight. And it is my extreme honor to have the privilege of telling you his story. I'm going to ask his sons, Fred Jr. and Lauren, to come up and accept the plaque on behalf of their dad.